Alright, hey everybody. So, for those of you joining in tonight, wait, what in the world is going on here? There we go. For those of you joining in tonight, this is going to be a any percent run of Shadowgate 64. This is the game's marathon debut. As the title implies, it's a 64 game, quite obscure one at that. There's not very many runners of the game at all. In fact, I'm the first new runner in quite a few years to managed to get some kind of world record in the game. But that being said, it's essentially a point-and-click adventure game, minus the point and clicking. Let's just get right into it. We'll start a new game in 3, 2, 1, go. Naturally, we're going to be skipping this first cutscene here, sort of, with the exception of this part of the cutscene. It's not too heavy of a cutscene of a kind of game, but there's definitely a few sections of downtime throughout. As a whole, the game is a first-person perspective, so movement is kind of king in a game like this, you know. You move with the C buttons and turn your camera with the stick, kind of like GoldenEye or, you know, your traditional FPS games from that era on the 64. And for those of you wondering why it looks like it's running at 2 frames per second, it just legit looks that bad in some locations, which is obviously fun, right? The game itself has quite a few sections where I'll be making some safety saves, because it's just a really volatile speedrun. If I die, the run is over. It's not that I get to retry and we lose a lot of time. The run is literally over if I haven't saved the game. So I'll definitely be utilizing some safety saves for sure. The very first thing here is we talk to this sorcerer here who is in a jail cell next to us. Like most fantasy, you know, Western fantasy style games, this game is more so a rip-off of Lord of the Rings. We're playing as a character who is simply known as the Halfling. Nice and creative, right? And our main goal is to essentially try to free this sorcerer, at least for the first big chunk of the game. But starting off, the game pretty much immediately thrusts us straight into your typical point-and-click adventure stuff, where we have to gather items and solve a variety of puzzles. Our very first puzzle here has some pretty cringy noises. Check this out. Absolutely disgusting, but we eat the chicken leg, and the chicken leg itself, we are able to take this bone and use it to break into the sewers. First, we got to move some straw off of this trap door, though. Pretty simple stuff. We do not want to open the lid. What happens if you say yes there is you try to open the lid, and then it says you can't get it to budge. You need something to pry it open. And simply put, it gives us a couple extra text boxes, so we'll be saving some time by saying no. We'll be implementing that a few places in the game. So immediately we're going to come right here and we're going to grab this iron bar. Some of the areas in this game are quite dark. It just sort of is what it is. It's kind of a dark game. It's meant to be just a tad bit spooky, if you will. Coming into this room here, though, we're going to use our iron bar immediately, and we are actually going to use this iron bar again later. It's one of the very few items that has multiple uses throughout the run, and it's actually interesting because I actually implemented a small route change to use the iron bar a second time, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaking of crossing bridges, though, if we fall in this water, we die. So I am going to be playing it a little bit safe. Here, we need to kind of just turn carefully so that we don't walk into the water. During a serious speedrun attempt, I would obviously just charge and hope I don't die, of course, but we're in a marathon, so let's play it a little bit safe, make sure we can get through the game, you know. But we come in here because we need the pickaxe. Always a good time. The pickaxe is going to allow us to climb up out of the sewers. Once we come back in this room, we can kind of just dart straight across that bridge with minimal trouble. We will be seeing this area later, though, and there's normally a skip we can do here, but we're going to be doing it the easy way later. So coming up here, we're going to use our pickaxe to climb this wall. Pretty simple puzzle. A lot of your time saving this game is just menuing, dismissing text as quick as you can, making sure you're in range before you use items, because if you use them out of range, you get a text box that says some. I believe this can't be used here. I believe my world record has a couple instances of that, and I think I'm not entirely sure actually. But coming up here, we enter the first sort of sub-dungeon, and pretty easy stuff, honestly. Just basic puzzles, nothing too fancy. We're going to start off by immediately going into this room, and we're going to be picking up a rope from behind this corner. We'll be needing this rope later to escape the area that we're in, which is actually essentially the attic. We're essentially in kind of like the attic of a cathedral right now, and we can't get out without climbing down. We're going to come in here. We're going to grab the fairy statue, which we need for a puzzle coming up here briefly. Or fairy sculpture, and then it says statue. Really, some inconsistent nomenclature in this game for objects. It's always fun. And yes, as someone said in chat there, I can't see my OBS is covering. I'm not sure who said it, but you can die from misusing certain items, which is very unfortunate. So as I said earlier, I will be taking some safety saves throughout. The music in this game is actually quite good. The vibes really relaxing. So I'd like to, I guess you can call this Obscurathon After Dark with Kefka. You know, we got nice, chill, walking simulator sort of game, right? But then we're going to grab the gnome statue. And then we meet Lakmir. We'll be seeing this guy a lot. He's sort of like the owl in Ocarina of Time, honestly. Kind of just sort of tells you what to do, dumps a big bunch of exposition on you, and then vanishes. It's pretty terrible. We'll be seeing him quite a bit throughout the run. But first we're going to continue upwards through the attic of the cathedral that we're in to grab a couple of items. First we're going to come in here, and this is one of the few times we actually use strafing in the game to grab this right here. Liquid Sunset, or the red potion as I simply call it. We'll be needing that later for a very specific puzzle. And there are a lot of items that I'm not going to be grabbing that's not needed for any percent. Interestingly enough, there's no 100% category for this game at all. We need this coin way later in the game, but we're grabbing it while we're here, which will save us some time from having to come back and fetch it later naturally. And we are able to come back here later in the game as well. In fact, we'll come back here twice, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Now we get to do the puzzle with the statues. First, we use the fairy statue. Place it in this pedestal. And then, my bad, I said gnome earlier. It's an elf statue, I suppose. Looks more like a gnome to me. I don't know about you all. It's essentially just a gray gardening gnome, right? Then we're going to go up here, and we're going to get the flute, the pixie flute, which allows us to shrink, which is what we're going to use to escape this area and continue on into the game. A lot of running this game is just memorizing all the different pathways and stuff, and making sure that you buffer your directions in and out of, you know, text boxes and into rooms, so that you're constantly moving in the direction you need to be moving. Like right here, I'll be holding left as soon as I come out so that I can go towards the door faster. Here I'm holding right so we can get to the door quicker, and so on. Alright, coming through here, we're going to make use of our pixie flute. And we're going to escape this first area. But first, we got to set up our rope. Then we use the pixie flute. And here you can simply hold right to turn, look at the rope, and examine it to climb down. Lovely stuff. From here, we can just mash to get into the menu and use the flute again to grow big. That'll be the last you get to hear the little jingle. Unfortunately, that's a pretty jingle. This brings us to the graveyard, which we will be seeing one other time in the run. There is a skip that you can implement in the graveyard. I'll try to do it, actually. It's very low risk. And, honestly, low risk, low reward. So it's not going to be a big deal if we miss it, but I'll definitely try to do it. Unlike one of the other skips in the game, which can completely kill the run. Now we're actually going back into the cathedral, but into the main section of the cathedral, and the very first place we're going to go is the basement, to grab a couple items we need for some puzzles. First and foremost, we need to grab this key, and we don't need it yet, but we're going to go ahead and grab it just for the sake of not having to grab it later. Then we're going to come over here and grab this crowbar, which we'll be using in just a few moments. We're going to head back upstairs. Oops. Kind of looked the wrong way there. We come over here and we grab the vial of dragon tears, or the yellow potion, which we need for a puzzle coming up pretty shortly. But we're about to get into the first dungeon of the game, or tower, as it's called. There are a total of 4, and honestly, most of them are pretty forgettable, sort of. They're all kind of similar, but I'll let you all be the judge. Definitely a vibe, for sure. So coming up here is one of the first places we can very easily lose a run. I'm going to make a quick safety save as soon as we get... Oops. Excuse me, game? There we go. Sometimes when you have to press the action button, or A, to go through areas, and sometimes it's just a little bit finicky. We're going to go ahead and make a safety save right here. That does lose us a little bit of time, but if you look on the ground, there are these holes, and if we fall in one, we die, and it's game over, and literally the run is done. So, definitely going to lose a little bit of time for that, but it is what it is. Very first place we're going to go, in the first tower, now that we're in the first dungeon, is in this door here. We're going to immediately turn to the left here, and we're going to open this barrel and use the dragon tears, and it's going to mix the dragon tears into the water. We're not going to do anything with this yet because we don't have any way to get the water, but I went ahead and done that now because doing it later would require more menu time, because it would, as we gather more items, it's going to scoot the dragon tears further into our inventory. So it's just a little bit quicker to do it preemptively there. We're going to go downstairs and talk to Kefka14, or Lakmir, rather. You know, at least Kefka14 has a good theme. One of the shorter Lakmir sections. The end of this dungeon has one that's quite long. Coming on through here, we have... This is probably my least favorite room in the game. I often forget it exists because there's just nothing in it. It's just sort of a loading zone that we have to pass through like 5 or 6 times. For no apparent reason. It's quite irritating, and I always just forget that it's there. We're going to use the bottle of oil we picked up earlier, which essentially makes the rust on the hinges of this door looser, and allows us to pass on through. Then we're coming into this room here, where we take a left, and we go through this door, and we're going to be getting an emblem in this room that we're going to be using for a puzzle coming up very, very, very shortly. Nothing useful here. So we had my first mis-examine, where I went to grab the star crest there, and it just wasn't quite in the center of the screen enough to pick up. Pretty irritating when that happens. I'm sure we'll see it a few more times throughout this run. Continuing back upstairs, we're going to make one brief little pit stop to the left here to grab a rusty key, which we'll need for later. And also a mug, which we're going to use to get the dragon tears that I fused with the barrel of water. That mug grab is probably one of the harder item grabs in the game to do quickly, just because of its location relative to the key. It's somewhat debatable if it's faster to grab the mug or the key first. Not really sure. I usually grab the key first, though. Coming back into this room, nothing memorable to say here, just some corridors. Notice how I got stuck on the side of that staircase there? That's one of the reasons I hate that previous room, is I find that the banisters of that staircase are just... the geometry just kind of sticks out way further than what it looks like it should. Anyway, coming in here, we're going to use our mug. We're going to scoop up some dragon tears in our water. This is going to allow us to put out some special magic flame in the room across the hallway here, which we've not been into yet. But coming across here, you can see this purple flame. We're going to use the water with dragon tears, which will put out this fire. Then we're going to use the star crest, insert it into the slot, which opens our way through the rest of the dungeon, and then we're going to backtrack. This game's not too backtrack heavy. It kind of it both is and isn't. Like, you're always going back to previous areas, but there's almost always something new to do, with the exception of places like this where we're just simply, you know, going through this room again. And we are going to have to go back through this room again when we leave the dungeon, which is just kind of irritating, honestly. Some fun history about the speedrun of this game. Years ago, a little over 8 years ago, or close to 8 years ago, a speedrunner named Mordos was one of the only people that really ran this game with any sort of seriousness. And Mordos had the world record for well over 7 years before I started running the game, which is kind of crazy when you think about it for a 64 game. We got more Kabora Gabora, or Lakmir rather. Then you have sort of a pick-a-path puzzle, similar to like the Lost Woods. If you pick the wrong statue here, you'll warp back to the beginning. Obviously, it's the same every time, and I have the pattern memorized. So that's nice and convenient. And it's actually a really easy pattern. It's left, right, more or less. With the exception of the final one here, which is going to be yet another left. Like so. We're going to be going right through this door here. And now we're going to use the iron bar that we grabbed earlier. If y'all recall, I picked up an iron bar and I said we're going to use it for something else later in the run. So for a long time, the route would use the pickaxe in this machine, and it forges into a key that we need to use. As it turns out, I discovered that any metal object that you pick up in the game, or not any metal object, but a vast majority of them, can function the same way here. And this allows us to keep the pickaxe, which saves us about 25 seconds later in the run, because we can use the pickaxe to take the better path. I was quite pleased when I found that small optimization as well. In this room here, we're going to grab the Night Elixir, or the Blue Potion. And we're going to complete a pretty short puzzle, and then we've got a bit of a cutscene coming up, actually. But first we use the Night Elixir on this little bowl here. And then we're going to use the Liquid Sunset, or the Red Potion. This causes kind of a poof of smoke, naturally, you know, because we're mixing potions and whatever. We walk up onto this chair, and we get a slightly scripted cutscene where we look up, and it tells us we need to look around. Look at this little red spot, and we use the crest key that we forged out of the iron bar, which allows us to open this door here. Then we come in here, and there are 3 rings in here, and they do all serve a function in the game, but the only one you need to beat the game is the red ring, or the Ring of the Dead, which allows us to talk to ghosts. With the exception of Lakmir. Lakmir can just talk to us whenever, apparently. So, Lakmir is informing us that we now have the Ring of the Dead, and this will allow us to continue, but first, we're going to get our obligatory cutscene that introduces the villain of the game. The villain's name is Belzar. More or less, Belzar is an evil sorcerer, advisor to the king sort of individual, and his goal is to resurrect this evil warlock, and our goal is to stop him from doing so, naturally. I'm not going to spoil how that pans out, but it doesn't pan out well for Belzar or us, sort of. And a lot of the cutscenes in this game are, frankly, just cringe and quite uninspired. For those of you who are unaware, though, the original Shadowgate on NES is kind of a beloved game, and this game just really did not get the reception that the original did at all. You can tell that the developers who made this kind of just threw something together, it seems. Although some of the puzzles are a little bit creative in terms of item uses. So now he's explaining to us who the villain is, and it's sort of similar to the Ganondorf cutscene at the beginning of Ocarina of Time, where you look through the window, you see Ganondorf, and then Zelda explains who Ganondorf is. A similar situation. But then we gotta leave the dungeon the old-fashioned way, on foot. No warps for us. It's unfortunate. The good news is it doesn't make us take the warping paths backwards. It just takes us straight back to the beginning of the warp statues, which is quite convenient. Oops, went the wrong way there briefly. Very easy to do that in this game due to some of the rooms just looking so similar. We're going to go on through, and I'm going to make another safety save here in just a moment. OT was just a Shadowgate ripoff, right? That's definitely what's going on. Also, I don't know if y'all could hear, every phone in my house is now vibrating. There is a flash flood warning in my area, so if that is coming through, I certainly apologize in terms of the sound of the vibrating. This room here has ended many runs, but we got through fine. So in essence, the save was completely useless, but, you know, better safe than sorry for a marathon, right? So, coming back through into the cathedral, we are going to continue into the basement. If you look, there was an item on the ground to my left there. It's the nail that we pried with the crowbar. That is the intended object to use to forge the key from earlier, but it takes time to go back and grab it, so we just simply use the iron bar. Coming into here, we're actually going to do some grave robbing. We're going to equip the Ring of the Dead. We're going to use the gold key. And open the coffin. And we're going to talk to this ghost. She explains that her son saw... I don't even know what she explains, actually. It's sad. I didn't learn a whole bunch about the story. Long story short, though, her son Saul was a treasure hunter, and we need to put his soul to rest, and that's sort of the quest we're on now. We're going to use the rusty key here, and we're going to go all the way down this hallway, and for those of you who are astute, this is the sewer area from earlier in the game, and this sort of gives us a quicker access into the area. We're going to be switching back and forth from equipping the Ring of the Dead to Jezebel's Pendant quite a bit in this game. Number one, we don't want to talk to ghosts unless we need to for a particular reason. In this case here, we have to talk to this guy here, who explains that his daughter is, you know, a ghost, and he wants us to return her home. He tells us that we can use this key to help, and that we can also take her slipper with us as sort of a way to maybe help find her. We're going to go ahead and grab this while we're here. We could have came in this room earlier when we were here, but we wouldn't have been able to talk to the ghost to get the key, and the slipper is actually, like, cosmically stuck to the table as well, so essentially it's a waste of time. Now, coming through here, we are going to immediately equip Jezebel's Pendant. If you have the Ring of the Dead equipped, you can't talk to actual, just regular NPCs. But we're finally in the actual village of the town, where we can, or, you know, the castle town, or whatever you want to call it, where we can actually talk to people. The very first thing we're going to do, very annoying, it would be great to find a way to skip this, is we're going to come in here and we're going to talk to this bard. And unfortunately, this is a solid 2-ish minute cutscene where we have to listen to all 3 of the bard's songs. It sucks. I really wish there was a way to skip this part of the game. There's definitely some good prospects for skips in this game that haven't been found yet, just based on the layout of places. I'll get into some of that more later when we return back to the prison to free the sorcerer from right at the beginning of the game. But if we could find a way to free that sorcerer earlier, we wouldn't have to do a solid 10 or 15 minutes of just talking to different NPCs and fetch quests and such. Alright, we're on to the bard's final song. He explains, basically each of these songs sort of gives you clues to how to solve certain puzzles and different things we need to do in the game. We already know how to do all of them. There's no RNG in this game, luckily. And that's great. But we're finally going to be able to continue our journey now. And the bard is going to give us an item that we need from him. Very simple item. I would love to find a sort of situation where we don't have to get this item and can kind of use something else similar to the iron bar situation, but no such stuff has been found yet. I encourage people to play this, look for time saves. It's a vastly unexplored game as a speed game, and even casually, I would argue. There's just not a whole lot of information out there about it beyond basic walkthroughs. So here is a interesting route deviation where we're going to continue to the other side of Castletown. What the game normally expects you to do here is continue, or turn around and go backwards to the bar to talk to a couple characters, but we're going to go this way. And we're going to get that 25-second time save that I brought up earlier. Anyway, we come over to this guy. Come on, menu. We use the coin, and we're going to trade the coin to this guy. Look at his face. Sort of reminds me of the face models from like the N64 wrestling games. Kind of twisted, very asymmetrical looking. Like you can tell they just made the face texture and stretched it over some polygons in an uneven way. Anyway, we need him to move, so we can come over here and grab the second slipper that goes with the first slipper. Now we're going to climb this ladder. I wish I could say that if you're interested in speedrunning this game, come check out the community Discord, but there's not a community. I'm the only active runner, and I'm the only active runner that's ran this game in quite a few years. So if you're interested in this game, shoot me a message, I guess. I would love to talk more about it and help people learn to run it, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's very similar to GoldenEye graphics, it really is. So coming in here, we're going to re-equip the Ring of the Dead. And we're going to go ahead and find the little girl that we were requested to find earlier. Having both the slippers and stuff allows us to go ahead and kind of finish that quest up, minus talking to the dad after we found her. That's going to allow us to get a very important story item for later. We're going to come back through this door. And we're going to go this way, but we're going to go ahead and equip Jezebel's pendant because we've got to make a stop by the bar and talk to the barkeep, who gives us some pretty relevant information and also asks us a few questions. And also, I sort of lied. There is RNG. The questions that you can be asked during this section are random, but there's only like 5 different ones, and it'll ask 3 of them. So I'll be doing these text boxes a little slower. 2, 3, okay. So that first question's always the same. He asks if you're a grave robber. You say no. What season was it when Saul came home? High winter. Who was he last seen with? Dwarf. And Jezebel came sick with Black Death. Easy peasy. After this, he tells us that there's someone here that we should probably talk to, and that is this woman here. She is a partner of that... Oops. Some misexamines there. She is the partner of the sorcerer from earlier in the game, and she explains that we need to free him from the prison, and sort of gives us an item that'll help him out. It's more or less a Palantir from Lord of the Rings. It's a crystal ball that can kind of help him escape. Also, I think our character actually does have a name. I think our character's name is Dale. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me. Anyway, we're going to come over here. We're going to use the key that the dad gave us a little bit earlier to unlock the cemetery, and this area should look a little bit familiar. It's the cathedral from earlier, but now that we have the Ring of the Dead, there's a few puzzles we can solve here. So here we have to use the dragon tears on this grave. Oops. Then we re-equip the Ring of the Dead. And talk to this person here, which explains to us what we need in order to drain some water later. Unfortunately, best I can tell, if you do not talk to this person, or ghost, rather, you can't even use the item when you get it later, without knowing that you can use it, because they tell you the incantation you have to speak in order to make it work. Here's the graveyard from earlier, and there's a skip here that you can do. Normally, what you would do is walk here and talk to this ghost, and he would explain that nobody respected him in life. If you kind of get along the... perfect, I got it actually. If you get along the edge there and use the flower beforehand, you won't talk to him twice. So it saves about 10 or 15 seconds, since we only have to talk to him once. Coming up is the hardest skip in the game. I'm going to make it very easy, for the cost of about 10 seconds or so. Normally, what you can do is very carefully walk around this particular skeleton on the ground to avoid talking to a ghost while wearing the Ring of the Dead. But unfortunately, that requires also dodging some water and not dying. So I am going to go ahead and equip Jezebel's Pendant. And this will allow us to not have to deal with that. We can just simply walk past. And that's definitely what I would recommend people running this game starting off to do. Yes, it requires you to go into your menu a few extra times, but it's not a big deal. There's the skeleton there. If you walk and don't let that skeleton on screen, you essentially avoid talking to the ghost entirely, and you don't have to unequip the Ring of the Dead, which we still need the Ring of the Dead equipped in order to talk to this guy up here. Okay. Oh, I thought I walked off the edge for a second. I got a little bit scared. The hitbox from talking to this guy is a little weird. He gives us some treasure. And now here is the part where we get to use our pickaxe again to save a little bit of time. Typically, we would have to go all the way back through the sewers, back up through the cathedral, etc., etc. But now we can simply go through here, because we still have the pickaxe. Instead of using the pickaxe to forge the key, oops, wrong way. And we're going to come in here and we're going to talk to that dad from earlier, now that we found his daughter and had put her spirit to rest. And he's going to give us the water stone. If you recall, we talked to a ghost earlier that told us some magical incantation words. Those incantation words allow us to use the Stone of Water. And that is the last time we need the Ring of the Dead at all. So the route that I have implemented essentially allows us to avoid equipping some extra stuff throughout the course of the run. And also is a slightly shorter path. It saves about 20 to 30 seconds over the old route that was used for a long time. Coming through here, we're going to take a left and we're going to go visit the shop. Now, the reason we're visiting the shop is we're trying to break that sorcerer out of jail from the main beginning of the game. And in order to do that, we got to distract the dungeon master, prison keeper, whatever you want to call him. Oops. I made a bit of a mistake there. And I talked to him instead of immediately trying to trade him the treasure, which is what you're supposed to do. He offers you 3 different violins. You don't want to mash through this until you really know what you're doing. But you do not want the violin without strings, you want the chipped violin. And now we're going to go back to where the dungeon is, and we're going to use the violin to distract the dungeon keeper. If you recall, the bard, his last song talked about how the dungeon keeper would pluck away at his strings all through the night, and that he lost his precious violin and made him really sad. So we're going to use that violin to essentially sneak into the dungeon and free our sorcerer buddy. Coming through here, we place the violin on this table. We can hear him coming up the stairs, and we gotta hide. Once he's playing, we grab the dungeon key. And then we go into the dungeon from the main beginning of the game. Now, there's definitely some potential for, you know, some skips and weird stuff. Because the beginning of the game is right here, close to 2/3 or so of the way through the game. So, it'd be interesting to find a skip that allows you to immediately leave the dungeon and kind of just enter the second half of the game really quickly. Anyway, we give the Palantir, or orb, the sorcerer, which allows us to teleport out, and the dungeon keeper is now locked in the dungeon. Well, not quite yet. Oops. Now he is locked in the dungeon. Unfortunately, the game won't let you leave if you don't use the key again and lock the dungeon keeper in, which I find very silly. You should just be able to leave, in my opinion. Like many games from this year, there's lots of story flags that have to be checked, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to go back to the bar. I went the wrong way. Now we're going to go back to the bar and talk to the sorcerer and the woman sorcerer. And there's not really much of a point in even talking to them other than it unlocks the sorcerer's house, which has a couple items that we need for later in it. Pretty funny cutscene here, though. He makes a fun noise. And then they vanish, and we get one of the game's few jokes where the bartender says, "Hey, who's going to pay their tab?" And we just leave, naturally. I went the wrong way. That is okay. We're gonna roll with it. We can get to the location I need to go in either direction. Not a big deal. We'll take the slightly scenic route. Only loses like 8 seconds. Over the non-scenic route, I should say. So, coming through here. Whoa. Coming through here, we're going into the sorcerer's house. This house is locked until we free him. The first thing we're going to grab is this strange tooth, or dragon fang, which we need for a puzzle right at the end of the game. We're going to grab this bedpost, which is a lever. Very easy thing to miss. And then we also need this flint on this shelf over here for another puzzle coming up. Pretty easy to get turned around in this game due to the similar appearance of everything. Alright, coming through here, we're going to open the third dungeon. And yes, you heard that right. Third dungeon. Whatever happened to the first? The first you kind of solve throughout the course of the game. It's the place where we talk to the dad and his daughter, the ghost. And that dungeon is sort of solved throughout the course of the game. I thought the game froze for a second. Everything kind of stood still for a second. That was weird. Alright, so we use the water stone, which allows the water to drain and us to go up here so that we can drain more water, which I've always found personally to be kind of redundant. I've always wondered if there's perhaps a way to use the water stone. We're gonna hope. I don't remember if this is left, right, right, or right, left, left. We're gonna try right, left, left first and see if that's it. I'm gonna use the lever. As soon as we attach the lever, he appears and says, "Hey, if you pull the lever, it'll open the third dungeon." Gee, thanks, man. Sounds good, bro. Alright, come on. Please tell me I didn't do the puzzle backwards. I did! No! Okay. It happens. So it's left, right, right. That is my bad. That's something that always gets me in games. Sometimes I mix up little things like that sometimes. Pretty easy thing to do. There we go. That is my bad. We are drawing fairly near towards the back quarter or so of the game. But now we get a cutscene that shows us some water draining. If you recall this area from earlier where the little girl ghost was, there's a door down in that water that is essentially the entrance to the third dungeon. The third dungeon is probably one of the harder parts of the speedrun, for sure, for beginners. There's just some very maze kind of locations, very puzzle heavy. You'll see what I mean when we get to it. Alright. So let's go ahead and hit that third dungeon. Personally, the third dungeon is my favorite dungeon. The music's just really creepy and like atmospheric and stuff. It's just very fascinating to me. But first we gotta leave this area. I am gonna be making a safety save before we enter that third dungeon as well. Also, be very careful in this area here. If we fall off the edge, we die. So you want to make sure you're taking good straight lines, even if you got to sort of readjust yourself for a moment. That also applies to this area where there's that chasm to our left there. If you don't want to fall down into that, you die. And then the run is over. Very volatile speedrun. Alright, continuing through here, we're going to go back through this door and work our way to the third dungeon. The third dungeon has one area that's very frustrating where your controls are reversed, meaning forward is backwards, left is right, and so on and so forth. There are ways around it, but those cost time, so we're not going to do any of those, and my controls are just going to, you know, simply be reversed. Here we are in the third dungeon. The first place you come is right over here, and you examine a switch on the back of this, which leads you through a door. We got to grab this little piece of a puzzle here. And this is probably the easiest puzzle in the game, especially speedrunning wise. Come up and examine this. Make the correct coat of arms. Sounds good, man. Let's do it. I don't know why the text box is so weird in this section, but the correct order is 1, the end, and then you just mash. Like so. The Dreslin family coat of arms. Lovely. Then we get to what I like to call the demon wall. Now, I'm going to make a save. Demon wall can't kill us, but if we get a question wrong, it warps us out, and don't want to deal with that. He essentially asks you questions about the lore in the game. And the questions are random. I think there's a total of 16 different things the 5 walls can ask. So you do got to memorize the answers to these. Learning this in the Japanese version was quite irritating. What was the name of the first dragon? It's Bahalor. Woo! I forgot. I couldn't remember if it was Bahalor or Rosalar. I don't get that question very often. That's a pretty uncommon one. I've actually never gotten that question there before at all. And then the last one's always the same. The rightful king of Cal Torlin is Dreslin, which is pretty obvious. We just did the Dreslin coat of arms. I'm going to make yet another safety save before we go step into this statue, which is going to warp us, similar to the statues in the second dungeon. And this is our section that has reversed controls. And if you walk into these spinning blades, you die. So I'm going to be playing it kind of safe-ish. And if you walk into that statue there, it warps you back to the beginning, so we obviously don't want to do that. Perfect. Okay. Whew. That's honestly probably the most nerve-wracking section of the run. It's super late game, and when you're on a good pace and your controls are reversed, it's quite spooky. Anyway, we're going to come over here. We're going to use the flint that we picked up from earlier to light this candle, and we're going to take it with us. And the goal of this puzzle is to solve this whole maze section before the candle burns out. You can see we have it in the corner of our screen up there. I went the wrong way. I always do that in that room. I even did that in the world record, which is pretty funny. This section is honestly not too hard once you know where you're going. There's nothing that can kill you, but you can get turned around quite easily. But the goal of this section is to push these switches in the correct order. That is switch number 1. What just happened? That was weird, dude. Okay. Here's switch number 2. If you're not careful there, you can go back down the stairs instead of turning that corner, which, you know, obviously loses some time. Coming through the door, we're going to go up the ladder. Where are we? Oh, okay. We're going to hit this switch. We're going to go this way. This room here is similar to like the Lost Woods. The path will just loop forever if you take the wrong path. The correct path is always the further door from you. When going back or forth from it. So notice how I went to the further doorway, and this will get us back to the ladder right here. Lucky for us, you can't really die in this section, so that's good. Just sort of a maze and kind of irritating. We press this button again, which opens this back up and allows us to climb back down into the first area, but now that we've pressed more buttons, this first area has been rearranged, and we can press this switch. And we go back the way we came. Very confusing section of the game the first time you're playing through it. Very irritating as well. And when we come back through here, we have to press this button a third time to reopen the path. Oops. The door on the right. And then we can continue on, and we're basically done with the third dungeon. Up these stairs. Oops. We want to use the candle on this candelabra. I believe that's what that's called. Is a candelabra. Could be incorrect on that. When we come into this room, pretty interesting puzzle. You have to go into the mirror, and in order to do that, you walk backwards. Coming into this room here, we're going to grab the Ring of the Kingdom, which is an item we need to beat the game. Very important object, indeed. We're going to go ahead and equip it, which we need to in order to take this warp pad. Takes us out of the dungeon. We're going to talk to Gabora one more time. Or Lackmere, rather. That joke will eventually wear thin. It already has. And then we're going to go into the fourth dungeon. First, we got to figure out the way to open it, though. The fourth dungeon is the Dragon Tower, I believe it is called. And it's honestly very short, very underwhelming. You can tell that they sort of just rushed through to finish the game out. To be totally honest with you, I really don't like the fourth dungeon. The music in it's quite nice. It's definitely a vibe, but it's super easy. There's not a lot to it. Getting into it's frankly harder than beating it. But we're very close to the end of the game at this point. Okay, we got no. Almost went back to the church there. You end up revisiting the church so many times, I sometimes get confused And I'm like, am I going towards the church or where? But anyway, we're coming back into the first dungeon of the game. And we're opening this door, which won't open until you have the Ring of the Kingdom. And you get the Dragon Flute. We need the Dragon Flute to get into the final dungeon of the game, which is coming up very, very shortly. As I said, the final dungeon is pretty underwhelming compared to the others. I think the third is probably my favorite. The second's kind of cool, but it's just a little bit long, honestly. Whereas the third one's just more interesting. I like the sort of almost horror-esque vibe to it. I remember when I was a kid, it creeped me out quite a bit, honestly. Just the music and the general ambience of it. Anyway, the fourth dungeon is back through here, where we initially, during the water, come to the end of this path. In a speedrun, I would just charge down that path, or a normal, world record attempt speedrun, I would just charge straight down that path, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to play it a tad safe. And here we are in the fourth dungeon. Extremely short, but there are a couple things we got to grab, and a few small puzzles to solve. There's also quite a bit of lore in this dungeon, but the speedrun skips over it, of course. And if you fall off the edge here, you die. When in doubt in this game, if you're iffy on doing it, it kills you. So I wouldn't recommend experimenting around during a speedrun with this game, for sure. Because there's no continue points in this game at all. But anyway, we come into this room, go down the stairs, and we're going to grab this item here, which we need to defeat Belzar, the villain in the game. And honestly, it's probably one of the most underwhelming fights in video game history. My bad. It's actually like one of the top anime battles of all time, right? Anyway, we come to the end of this, and if you recall, we picked up a Dragon Fang earlier. We're going to use the Fang, which completes the insignia and allows us to continue up the stairs. Then this last sort of push through this dungeon is literally just a spiral winding path. Riveting stuff. You can cut the corners really tight to save some time, but you risk falling if you do that, and we don't want to do that. We're in a marathon. We want to just, actually get through to the end of the dang game, right? But we're very close to the end at this point. A lot of lore in this room here, but we're skipping over it entirely, excuse me, to come into this room, and goodness gracious, I don't remember. That is correct. Okay, so right, left, right, left, left, right. Okay. I often, for these puzzles that have like an either-or option, I sometimes just screw up. I'm not like dyslexic necessarily, but I just often forget. Like, is it left, left, right? Is it right, right, left kind of situation, And that opens the area to where we can go awaken the last dragon. Fun stuff. Here's the dragon. He's been put to sleep with a stick in his head, or the Staff of Ages, as it is called. And we need that staff. Now, we don't want to use that staff. If you use the staff, you die, which is really weird. But first, Lacamir's going to pop up and be like, hey, you need to wake up the dragon. We're going to go ahead and grab the staff, which wakes up the dragon, and then we get one of the few sort of actual cutscenes in this game where stuff really happens. The dragon wakes up, and because we have the Ring of the Kingdom and the Staff of Ages, naturally we can, pull a straight Jon Snow / Daenerys Targaryen and just fly this thing around. I love this cutscene. It's just so like look, his model's just like frozen on it. And then it's just sort of a pre-rendered backdrop kind of situation. I love the way it looks when it flies back in here. Like, It looks so bad. Great. Alright, we are at the main end of the game now. Pretty much. First thing we do is we need to cause a distraction. We come in here and we use the flint that we picked up from earlier, and it makes a fire in this straw, which gets the guards scrambling and distracted and all that good stuff, which allows us access to some other areas that we haven't been through yet. This part right here is frankly one of the more irritating parts of the run. I've lost so many runs here. You're talking to this guy, if you walk too close to him, he pushes you away and you get a bunch of text boxes, but you have to get just close enough to him to actually use the pendant. Turns out he's the person who murdered Jezebel, which is the one we talked to earlier in the casket. We show it to him and he feels a bunch of guilt, and then he leaves this area because he feels guilty, I guess. Cool. Anyway, it takes us into this final room, which, if you recall during the cutscene from earlier in the game, this is where Belzar ran off to. And we're coming into Belzar's chambers, and we're going to actually complete his spell for him. Preemptively. And then I'm going to shut up because, oh man, the noises in this section of the game are just absolutely hilarious. Like, I can't even begin to explain how good of a soundbite this is. I would love for somebody to use it for something. I'll be quiet once we're getting to it. It's just really good. It's cringy, but it's like in the category of so bad it's good, you know? So, I'll be quiet. Check this out. I'll even slightly turn up my game audio for you guys. So yeah, hilarious stuff. I love it. It's like, what in the world, dude? What in the literal hell? Like, who thought that sounded good? I love how the laugh is just like a looping audio bite. It's so terrible. It gets me every time. Alright, we're literally at the main end of the game. Like, we're talking 2 minutes out, maximum. Oh yeah, total cursed Banjo-Kazooie noises. Also, sup, Onar. So we get one more Gabora cutscene, where he explains that the Warlock Lord has been resurrected because the spell was complete, but the casting of said spell killed Belzar, which is good. Now we need to find a way to kill the evil Warlock Lord, and I am going to come in here and make a safety save, because if we use the staff at the wrong time, or at the wrong location while looking at slightly the wrong pixel, it kills us, and the game doesn't end. Which is terrible. I've lost runs here. I've lost world record pace runs here, in fact, where I just use the staff and I'm looking slightly too far to the left or right, and that's it. Oh, we're definitely going to sub-hour. I'm even going to do a safety save, and we're still going to sub-hour. So, you come over here. Please. Okay. So we got the staff. That's the scary part. The staff is the hard part here. The ring. And there we go. Once we dismiss this last text box, that's Shadowgate 64, gang. Honestly, it's a pretty good run. It's a very relaxing run, sort of. There's a lot of things that can cause you to lose the run. But at the same time, just the general ambiance of the game and sort of just walking around and picking up stuff and whatnot. It's a very relaxing. I recommend it for sure if you're just wanting something that's movement based and not overly technical, but still has a lot of small things you can implement. It's a good time. And 58:32 is pretty good. The world record's 55:12, so I'll take that. That's a solid run. I really wanted to get sub 1 hour for the marathon, so I'm definitely satisfied with that. You guys are going to be seeing a decent bit more of me throughout the rest of this marathon. I'm running a few other Obscure 64 games, but there's a lot of cool stuff left coming up on the docket, so stay tuned for some more great runs, more obscure speedrunning goodness, Obscurathon after dark, if you will. And thanks for having me, guys. I hope you enjoyed. It was a lot of fun. I'll be back just a couple hours for some Fighter's Destiny. And thanks for the GGs.